This is the Gutsy Health Podcast with Janique and Tristan Roney. Hey guys, welcome back to the Gutsy Health Podcast.
Hey everybody. We are really excited about this. We've got an awesome guest on today, and to introduce her, I need to tell you all a story. A couple of years ago, I think it's been about 2 years now, I was a vegan. And I'd been a vegan for a while, and I thought I was doing it for my health, and I thought I was doing it for the planet. I thought I was doing it because I was a good person. In fact, I went to a Buddhist university and got a master's degree. So I thought veganism was just like the ultimate way of living. Mm-hmm. And then I started to have health issues. But what actually happened for me very first was I was following Chris Kresser, who is just an awesome person when it comes to health information and everything. But he introduced me to someone through his email list, I think, that just changed the way I look at things forever. Because he introduced me to this idea that we can actually have a sustainable, healthy, and ethical world that includes meat. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I started reading about this and learning about this woman, Diana Rodgers is her name. She's a registered dietitian, and she is absolutely brilliant when it comes to understanding the truth, I guess, about how we raise meat and how we consume food and how we live a healthy life.
Exactly.
And so I've been chasing her to get her on the podcast now for like 8 months.
And we've been really excited about it.
And now we've got her on, and this is just a huge moment for me. So I want to welcome you to the show, Diana. We are so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so psyched to be here.
So we're going to be talking about a few things today, but really we're going to be talking about this concept of ethical meat. Now, there's a book coming out, and this book is awesome. I've been reading it. I'm just about done with it, and I am just so stoked about the concepts in it. In fact, I've been waiting for this book for a long time, so this is also a really exciting moment for me. But there are three kind of primary ideas to this book, and they all revolve around common myths around meat. Yep. The first is that meat is unhealthy. Yep. The second is that meat is bad for the planet. Yep. And the third is that meat is unethical, that you cannot be a good person and eat another living being.
And a lot of people that come into our clinic have these belief systems. And so I'm super excited to hear from Diana and what she has to say about those myths. Mm-hmm.
So let's jump into this. Diana, maybe introduce yourself a little bit. What do people need to know about you that I didn't say?
Well, let's see. I am a registered dietitian. I came to all of this kind of as a second career. I was working in the food marketing space for a long time, and also for NPR doing marketing, and really was battling a lot of health issues my whole life. So I found out in my mid-20s that I had celiac disease, and that answered a lot of issues that I had as a kid. I'm certain that it was undiagnosed celiac that was causing a lot of the health issues I had as a kid. And meanwhile, I've been living on this organic farm for the last 18 years. So I've been watching sustainable food production happen as I've been learning about this sort of evolutionary biology template for optimal eating. And I realized that the two, optimal regenerative food production and optimal eating really have the same exact framework, that it all goes back to basically this evolutionary biology template and mimicking nature, mimicking evolution, and just, we can use modern technology to solve some of the logistical issues, but really as much as we can, going back to, way before the agricultural revolution when it comes to food production and for eating. And so anyone who's in this sort of paleo real food space, it's a really easy jump to then look at food production and apply that same worldview.
Yeah, now that's something that really blew my mind when I first learned about some of the work that you're doing, which is that we can actually raise cattle in a way that doesn't require just insane amounts of resources. So tell us a little bit first about, maybe we can jump into the health aspects of it, because that's maybe the biggest hurdle that a lot of people have to overcome, that we've been taught our whole lives, or at least a lot of us, that meat is bad for you. Meat is an indulgence. It's something that we do because it tastes good. But if we do too much of it, we're going to get cancer or heart disease and die.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so in the book, Rob and I, Rob Wolf is my co-author, and I first make the case that the evidence against meat is very poor, and that animal products are actually required for optimal health. So we get that out of the way first, because you can't have a talk about food production if it's about growing food that is unhealthy in the first place.
Exactly.
And so we get that kind of right off the table, that eating animals is something that that humans have always done in the past. We do talk about how there do seem to be a few people that seem to be okay on a vegan diet. But, a well-planned vegan diet plus animal products is actually an optimal diet for humans, that there's nutrients in meat, in animal products, that you cannot get from plants. And so then we move on to the environmental claims against meat, and how they're largely distorted, and strangely in a very similar way to the meat will cause you cancer information that's reported by the media, and how that's distorted, just, poor methodologies and misinterpretation of the actual science. And so we walk everyone through the land use argument, the water argument, the feed argument, all of those things, and then explain how cattle can actually benefit the land when managed well. So, what questions do you have? Where can I start? I mean, we talk about ethics, we talk about even the big picture. Why is meat scapegoated in the first place? All of that.
I would like to talk about the research behind that, because everyone likes to use research as weapons against each other's ideologies around meat. And that's where, a lot of people that don't understand research, they'll just, read like a blog that references research, and they're like, oh, well, because there is a paper on it, therefore it's true. Can we go a little bit more into the research and where we went wrong?
The health research or the environmental research?
Let's talk about the health research around meat. Like, for instance, everyone keeps referring back to like the China study. Yeah.
Well, interestingly, I could also point out that the publisher of the China study, Ben Bella, is actually the publisher of our book.
Oh, are you serious?
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
So how did that happen?
And, they're largely a vegan publisher. We went with them for a couple of reasons, but a big one was because they published the China study, and we actually thought if we could win these guys over, and if they could vet our arguments, who better?
That's amazing.
And so, that's just kind of a cool side note there.
Right.
So the evidence against meat is largely based on these observational studies. They look at large populations of people. This population ate meat, this other one didn't, and it must be the meat that caused X, Y, and Z.
And not the other hundreds of thousands of environmental factors and lifestyle factors that could be involving this.
Exactly. And so when you do adjust for those things, there was a big study out of Australia, massive study, over 60,000 people, that did adjust for this, is called confounding factors. So things like smoking, exercising, all of those things. They found absolutely no difference in longevity, no benefit at all to eliminating meat from your diet. There's also another kind of famous study that looked at people who shop at health food stores. So therefore, you're sort of already adjusting for, your typical health food shopper is less likely to drink and smoke as much as someone who shops at a conventional store. They're more likely to take care of their body, have a healthier lifestyle, eating more fruits and vegetables, which is generally considered a good thing. They also found absolutely no difference in longevity between meat eaters and non-meat eaters. And so there's no evidence to actually prove that red meat causes anything. As far as cancer goes, there's only links. And again, those links are extremely weak, even when it comes to processed food causing colon cancer. They like to use the studies against cigarettes as a template. And so, what they did with the cigarette studies is they looked at large populations. This population smoked and this didn't, and these guys got cancer. But, the difference in cancer rate was like 30 times higher than the average person. In the cases where they're linking processed meat to colon cancer, it wasn't even 2 times the risk. It was way less than that. So your average chance of getting colon cancer in just, the average person is about 5% chance that you're going to get it. If you eat 5 slices of bacon every single day for your entire life, supposedly the chance then goes up to 6%. Wow. But the media looks at that and says, oh, look, it's a 20% difference because the difference between 5% and 6% is 20%. And so it sounds like, oh my God, I have a 20 times higher chance when you don't even have a 2 times higher chance of getting cancer. And in the context of a real food diet, there's lots of different types of processed meat. Obviously, there's like prosciutto and traditionally made salami, or there's gross bologna that you could get at a gas station, right? Those are very different processed meats.
Totally.
A lot of people even look at roast beef and say that that's a processed meat when really it is less processed than most things. I mean, it's just roasted beef that's then sliced. That's not a processed meat.
Right. So what I'm hearing is we can eat bacon.
You can eat bacon, you're fine. Have an overall healthy lifestyle. Yeah, exactly. Eat some fruit and vegetables. Don't drink and smoke like crazy every night, and you'll be fine.
Right, exactly. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but whenever I post like our breakfasts, and I'm showing people like, oh, we have asparagus wraps, like we wrap our asparagus with prosciutto. People are always shocked and like, you eat bacon? And I'm like, well, yeah, it's organic, it's meat. It's got healthy fat. It's not sugar. I'm going to eat it, And so it's really interesting how and I feel like this has been a product of like decades where we have created these marketing campaigns where it's like, oh, meat is bad. These books like the China Study came out. And now we just have this like underlying understanding where people think, okay, I got to cut out meat to be healthier.
Well, there's absolutely marketing to it. And there's this faux science behind it that we've been talking about. But like the Eat Lancet report that came out recently, right? I'm looking at the recommended plate setup from the Eat Lancet, and the sliver allowed for animal products is like almost non-existent on there.
Wow.
There's 4 times as much space allocated for plant-sourced protein.
Oh, interesting.
Than there is for animal sourced protein.
Wow.
And this is supposedly a trustworthy organization that we should rely on for making our nutrition decisions.
Right, exactly. Right?
It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, the amount of red meat you can eat is less than the size of a blueberry.
Wow.
Per day.
Oh,
and you can only have, I think it was a quarter of an egg, but you can have 8 teaspoons of sugar.
And that just blows my mind.
That's totally fine.
That just absolutely blows my mind, because I think our listeners, if they haven't learned anything, the one thing that they have learned is sugar is bad for you. Like, don't eat it. And that's an issue that we have here, right? In our country, is that we are just overloaded with sugar, but meat's the bad guy.
Sugar and vegetable oils.
But there's a difference between the quality of meat that I think it's, Diana, you would know better. Like, are we researching the right kind of meat? Because there's a difference between grass-fed, grass finished beef. And then there's a difference between beef that is fed corn. Sorry about
your
the
dogs.
dog.
I can hear in the background.
Yeah, someone just knocked on our door.
Actually, so we go through the science in our book, and there's a lot of misconceptions even about typically produced beef. A lot of people think that it's fed corn its entire life, which isn't true. So the average beef cow, steer in America really only gets about 10 to 12% of their overall diet from grains, period. The rest is all cattle start on grass. And even when they're at the feedlot, it's not 100% grain that they're eating. They're eating a lot of they're upcycling a lot of nutrients. For example, corn husks from the ethanol industry that would decompose and emit greenhouse gases if we just left it in a pile. Yeah. And really the only use for that is to feed it to an animal, like a ruminant, and turn it into protein. And so it's really not so black and white, good meat, bad meat. And that's where nutritionally, there really isn't a massive case for eating only grass-fed meat or no meat. So this idea that we obviously have to eat less meat and better meat is from a nutrition perspective, not really that accurate. We looked again, at all of the research and the omega-3 thing, a lot of people say, oh, well, it's twice as much omega-3s, but beef is a really bad way to get omega-3s in the first place. And so you would still need to eat about 8 pounds of grass-fed beef in order to get the same omega-3s you could get in a 3-ounce piece of salmon.
That's a lot. Yeah.
And so saying, 2 pennies is twice as much money as 1 penny, while that's true, it's also sort of inflating the significance of twice as much money, right? And it's the same thing with the omega-3s. And so a doctor would never tell you eat organic vegetables or don't eat vegetables. And so as a dietitian who believes in meat and thinks that, it should be accessible to all people, even if they can't access perfect regenerative grass-fed beef, my advice is to buy the best meat you can afford, support the best farm practices that you can access, and really reduce your intake of processed food, because that's the real villain here. It's not meat. And actually, there are some even typical beef practices that aren't so bad. And especially when we compare it to chicken and pork, which are 100% fed grain their entire lives and raised indoors in cramped conditions and cages and things like that their entire lives. Beef is a way better choice nutritionally, ethically, and environmentally than chicken or pork could ever be.
Interesting. I never even thought of that. Like, chicken does eat grains, like
100% grain.
Free range would probably eat more like bugs and stuff and have a better protein diet, but those are really hard to come by, and
free range chicken, pasture raised, meat chicken is extremely rare. You can't really find that in a grocery store. I have not seen it in a grocery store. We used to raise it, but the price difference between, a chicken you can pick up in the grocery store, like I've seen them as low as like $3 a chicken or something like that. When we used to raise meat chickens on our farm, we had to charge about $30 a chicken.
Yeah.
And so the price difference just really, chicken should be that expensive.
Right.
Our intake of chicken has gone up about 400% in the last 30 to 40 years.
And that's at the expense of beef, right? People have cut down beef and increased chicken.
Yeah. So worldwide beef intake has flatlined, and in the US, it's actually gone down. So in the US, we eat about 2 ounces of beef per person per day, and we eat about almost twice as much chicken per person per day.
Wow.
That's insane.
And it sounds like what you're saying is that that's to the detriment of our health.
Yeah. Certainly I would recommend chicken over Twinkies and box mac and cheese and other things. Again, it's not like chicken bad, grass-fed beef good, there's a lot of nuance to all of this. But certainly from a nutrition standpoint, beef is about 30% more nutrient dense than chicken. Chicken's really high in omega-6s. If you're trying to balance your omega ratio, don't eat poultry, because that's really high. They eat 100% grain, and as monogastric animals, they translate that directly into their fat, where ruminants, it's a slightly more complex digestive pathway, because their rumen is actually digesting the grass for them. Anyway, so it's not like a direct translation to the fatty acid content.
Now, this is all new to me. Why aren't we talking about this more? Like, why?
Because the grass-fed beef companies don't like it when I say this. And then typical beef companies don't like that I say grass-fed is better environmentally.
Right.
And it's not just grass-fed. There's also nuance to that too, because there's different ways of raising animals on pasture. You could have, if you have a 1 acre pasture and the same cow on that land for the entire season, that's not great. You want to be moving that animal to new, fresh pasture on a regular basis. And so it's much better to be doing a more regenerative grazing pattern. That's, some people call it mob grazing or adaptive multi-paddock grazing or holistic management. But basically the idea is to mimic the way natural herds of animals move in the Serengeti. So they stay bunched together as protection from predators. But that actually concentrates their manure and their impact on the land. But then they're moving, they're not staying in one spot too long, because if you stay still, you're going to get eaten. Right. But that actually allows the land to have a nice long rest after it's been grazed, and allows the roots to regenerate back. And that's when the carbon can get sequestered and soil gets built.
That makes a lot of sense. So how do we vet farmers that do this? Like, what are the questions that we should be asking when it comes to buying our meat?
Well, you can go to a farmer's market and just talk to them and ask them how they raise their animals. You can ask to visit the farm and see, and you should look for patterns of movement and not just one paddock that has the same animals the entire season when they're not, if they're just scattered around overgrazing certain patches of land, that's not ideal. Not all farmers are going to want the public to just drop by. And so you have to respect that because it's not, they're not tour guides, like they're running a business and that's okay if they don't want you coming just unannounced. Right. But there's also great websites. There's eatwild.com. There's localharvest.org. And we also have, Rob and I, in addition to making this documentary film to show you what this looks like, we also have just developed a course called Meat Curious. And it's a course that folks can take on the nutritional, environmental, and ethical reasons why you should choose better meat. And one of the bonuses to that course is actually the ultimate guide to ethical sourcing. And so we kind of walk people through how to handle meat, how to thaw it, and also, how to really source it the right way, because people are concerned about not only its impact on the environment, but also the ethical treatment, what all these labels mean, things like that.
That's really cool.
So I want to talk a little bit more about this regenerative agriculture. And I'm also particularly curious about how it fits in with the current sort of the climate crisis that we're having, because one of the big arguments against cows is that, their farts are destroying the environment with methane. And then there's also the carbon issue. How do you address that? And what's the science actually say about that?
Yeah, so there's two things. One is there's a big difference between biogenic methane, which is produced by animals as part of their digestive process, and the fossil fuel industry and the methane and other greenhouse gases that emits. And so biogenic methane is part of a cycle that, the cattle will belch out methane. So it's not actually cow farts, it's burps. And that methane goes up into the atmosphere for about 10 years, and then it's broken into H2O and CO2. So that's what methane is. So the H2O is water, which is part of the water cycle, like rain, that, comes back down to us and creates clouds and, shade and things like that. And the CO2 is taken up by plants, and O2 is given off as oxygen that we breathe. The carbon is then taken up by the plants. That's what plants are, is carbon. And then some of that carbon gets leaked through the roots down into the soil, where it's fed to bacteria and fungi that then go. It's pretty amazing symbiotic process. It actually goes and mines the minerals and other nutrients that the grass needs in order to grow. And so the bacteria and fungi actually feed the plant in exchange for this carbon, these sugars that the bacteria and fungi live on. And then, as the cow, chews the grass, the roots will die back a little bit. And then when the cow moves off, the roots, that dead root matter and the dead bacteria and everything else is actually carbon that gets stored in the soil. And so well-managed cattle are actually a net carbon gain for our environment, whereas fossil fuels are just taking locked ancient carbon that's down in the Earth's core and methane, and actually just releasing it straight into the environment. So it's not part of a cycle. There's no balance to that equation. It's just straight up emissions. And so, when we look at the number of beef cattle that we have in North America, it's less than what we had before we got rid of all the bison and all the other large ruminants that we had here, before the 1800s. And so we don't have more methane producing animals, and we have to stop thinking about just emissions and look at the whole cycle and what we're getting as a net gain from the cycle. So then basically it sounds like you're saying that a well-managed cattle operation that allows the natural kind of ecosystem to do its thing, and cows being a part of that, will
actually help us to make this climate change situation less severe?
They will actually sequester more carbon than they give off in greenhouse gases. And they're one of our best tools at mitigating climate change, because most of our agricultural land is best suited towards grazing and not towards crop production, which emits tons of greenhouse gases.
That's really cool.
Now, how about from an ethical perspective? When I was back at Europa and we had a lot of vegans, vegetarians there, the general consensus was that, well, we don't eat meat because we don't want to take the life of another sentient being. But one of the things that I've been hearing about lately is how plant crops can actually take a lot of life as well in the form of the natural wildlife that would have been in that area. Is that accurate, or is that just kind of hearsay?
Yeah, so this is idea of the principle of least harm, and what death happens in order for your plant-based life to happen. Mm-hmm. And so just because you're not eating steak on your plate, something that a living, breathing animal that died, does not mean that you're necessarily causing less death through your eating habits. Right. It just means that you're not acknowledging the death that happened in that process. And so even on an organic farm, there's tractors that are going through, there's, organic chemicals that are actually biocides and can kill insects and weeds and things like that. We don't let deer in the fields. We don't let them just eat whatever they want. So you need to make sure that they can't get into your fields. If there's rabbits around, organic farmers will shoot them. And so there's plenty of death, even on the most beautiful organic Charlotte's Web looking farm that you can imagine. And then when we move to the more common practices of industrial agriculture, there's massive death that happens. We're losing our pollinators. We're destroying entire ecosystems to grow just one crop for miles and miles and miles. Right. And so all the life that lived there before, whether it was a prairie or a forest or whatever, has to go somewhere. And it doesn't just move, it largely dies. Right. And so, what you end up with, instead of, salamanders and butterflies and bees and, multiple species of grazing animals and everything that you might see on a more regenerative farm, what you see on a typical, soy or corn farm is an owl and a couple people maybe and a large tractor and then maybe some mice. It's what we want is more life. We want farming practices that bring more life to the area. And one large ruminant animal like beef can actually produce almost 500 pounds of meat. And so according to this principle of least harm, eating one large ruminant is actually causing less harm than all of the life that you could potentially be killing through, supporting just a plant-based diet.
Right.
I would encourage anyone listening to this to go look up some photos and videos of one of these massive crop production facilities after they've recently done a harvest. And what you will see is that, like Diana was saying, it is not this magical forest land of living life. It's a barren wasteland of nothing but dirt.
It's a dust bowl. Basically,
it's a dust bowl.
It looks dead. It looks completely dead. And it's how do you grow high nutrient dense food from dead soil, from a dead environment, dead, there's no microbiome. I loved how you mentioned that, the carbon being absorbed from the tree system goes in to feed the bacteria in the soil. And we forget about the bacteria in the soil and how important that is. It's not essential anymore, and it's absolutely essential. And we are experiencing the decay from destroying that ecosystem.
On the other hand, if you go look up some photos and videos of a regenerative agriculture process, and you'll see that does look more like the idyllic scene that we have in our minds about how things should be done. It just looks like nature. And you have these natural cattle herds that are kind of moving their way through nice and slowly, and things look really healthy. And the best part is that,
and so, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it looks like once you have it set up, it also takes a lot less active manipulation of what's going on to have it work well, because nature just kind of takes over and it does what nature wants to do.
Right. And some people will argue then that, well, why do we have to eat them? And why can't we just rewild everything and just have the deer and unicorns and rainbows and just live, in a city and, crop what we need and not eat them? And the problem with that is that we have moved into and destroyed rural America too, right? And so we don't have those large tracts of land, and we don't have the predators that we did once have. And so just to give an example, I live right outside of Boston. We have a massive deer problem here because we've gotten rid of all their natural predators. They're completely destroying ecosystems here. They're eating all the underbrush in the woods. There's way too many of them. They are destroying the habitat for ground nesting birds. I mean, it's a huge, huge problem, these deer, and people are hitting them with their cars, and it's a problem. But yet no one wants wolves, understandably. Here, 30 minutes outside of Cambridge, where I live. And but also no one wants hunters. So what are we supposed to do about these deer? And okay, well, there are areas where we maybe could hunt a little bit more, but that's still not really a great solution. We need to be managing on a much bigger scale if we're going to be feeding people. Right. And so even if folks don't, personally want to eat meat for personal reasons, and I get it, there are certain animals that I don't feel comfortable eating too. And so I understand that, certain people might not want to eat a beautiful cow for whatever their personal reasons, but it cannot be argued that it's more nutritious not to eat them, that it's environmentally better to eat them, or that it's ethically superior to not eat them. And so what we do have is massive amounts of rangeland and pasture land that needs to be covered. It cannot be cropped.
Yeah, exactly.
And really the best solution is to have herds of animals that are managed well.
So we're basically looking at, we can do the herd, the cattle raising there, or it can sit empty and barren and essentially do nothing. So what's really interesting to me, going back to the ethical argument real quick, is that what it sounds like the issue is that people don't want to take responsibility for their food choices. Right? They want to pretend that what they're doing is harmless and that everything is fine because they don't have any hands-on contact with the food production process. Right. Exactly. I mean, we're less than 2% of our population actually directly interacts with how food is produced. And so it's not their fault that they don't know. They just don't know. But it's, as you'll see in the film, we actually have farmers explaining that it's really hard to make important ethical and moral and policy decisions when you don't know very much. And so it's very dangerous to do that. And so that's what we're running into now, is that our bias against meat, our bad feelings about meat, our scapegoating of meat as the worst thing for our health and the environment, that's really just based on these fears of death and disconnection from nature and food production. That's really impacting policy. It's affecting, programs like Meatless Mondays in schools, where a lot of these kids, this could be the most nutrient dense or only meal they get all day long. Because in New York City, 70% of these kids are low income, 10% are homeless. Wow. And so there's never been any studies to show that, pulling meat out of someone's diet one day a week will do anything for the environment or to improve health status of kids. There's actually only been one study that looked at meat versus less meat in at-risk kids, and it showed that the ones who did get the meat supplement actually performed better physically, behaviorally, and academically. And so we know that meat is important, that the iron and B12 and other nutrients in meat are what kids need. And so, again, people are setting policy, which I think is pretty dangerous based on ideology and a religious-like bias against eating animals. Yeah, there's a really poignant documentary we watched. Do you remember what it was, Janique? It was a Native American tribe in like North Dakota, and they were buffalo hunting.
Oh, it wasn't a documentary. It was actually Chelsea lately. Oh. The Chelsea show.
All right. So
and I explain this to my son all the time. Is they wait. It's a very spiritual practice that they do when they go and hunt their bison. They wait for a bison to, what they say, offer themselves up. So they'll watch the herd.
They're going to separate themselves.
And then
from
the
herd,
bison
right?
separates itself from the herd, and then they hunt it really swiftly, and they pray over it, and they think it, and they use all of the parts of it. And it's very sustainable looking back. It's like, that's very conscientious, and they thank it for its life. They thank it for its sacrifice. And I think that's very beautiful.
Well, and what really struck me about it is that it gives them that hands-on direct experience with, in order for me to live, something else has to die.
Right.
And therefore I need to be as responsible as possible with my choices, but also acknowledge that that's part of the circle of life.
Right.
That we don't get to escape this responsibility that we hold. And so I wonder if, like, one of the best things we could do for our children is to teach them this concept at a young age,
right,
so that they recognize the importance of their food decisions, and that they have these hard choices regardless of which direction they go, whether that's veganism or carnivore or whatever it is.
Right. Well, Diana, you brought up, you've been talking about insects a lot, just sporadically throughout this conversation. And we don't realize how important the insects, the biome of the soil, we're totally fine spraying our lawns to kill the bugs, and yet we're going vegan, and that's, I think that's a disconnect that we are not putting two and two together. It's like, no, if we are going to care about the planet, if we are going to care about sustainability, we have to care about all of it. We can't hate bugs, and I'm not saying we don't kill spiders in our house, and we've taught our kids to be really kind to bugs, but they're a part of this ecosystem too, like they're like, now I'm going to sound like I'm for bugs' lives and everything. But,
bug lives.
But like, we have to think of the entire system, and that includes bugs, that includes animals, that includes the soil, that includes the water usage. I mean, what is it? Something like, to grow one almond, it takes a gallon of water to grow one almond, and so we have to take all of these lives into account, all of these resources into account, and be like, this way of farming is sustainable, and it's the most sustainable, and it's giving the most life back into the environment.
Right. And so we can either, not eat meat and not pay attention and hope that, it all just goes away, or we can actually try to support farmers that are raising meat in a better way, and actually change the way food is produced. And so, this is a great opportunity right now with COVID. We're seeing the fragility of our industrial food system, and how dangerous it is to have only 5 major companies controlling our meat supply for the whole country, and what happens when there's a problem with one of those or 2 of those companies. It's really, really dangerous, and we've let it happen. Because we've just demanded cheap food that tastes really good, and it's destroyed our health, and it's also destroyed the environment. And so, that's where our book is really unique, because most of the people that are talking about sustainable diets are, arguing for a vegetarian or vegan type diet. And what Rob and I are arguing for is we have the same exact concerns, but we're actually arguing for a very, very different system. And when we argue for more cropping for things like Impossible Burger, we're actually arguing for, more profits to end up in the hands of Silicon Valley and less of a connection to the people who are actually producing your food. It actually is more steps away from, like, folks can come here, they can buy meat directly from me. I know that's not possible everywhere, but when we have meat that's produced in labs or, fake factory formed protein pucks, the profit there goes not to the food producers at all. It goes to the investors and the IP holders of the processes. And And it's not a healthier product. It's not a more ethical product, and it's not a more nutrient dense product. But it's being sold as all those three things.
And our listeners know that we are pretty anti-authoritarian in a lot of ways. Right. So if there's anything that's going to help bring the power back to the people, bring the power back to the grassroots movements, then we're going to be for that. And we are 100% for this movement of making food local again as much as possible, and getting all of the concentrated power out of the hands of these giant conglomerations that really don't have our personal long-term interests in mind.
No, absolutely. Well, Diana, can you tell us when is your documentary being released?
So actually, we are trying really hard to do a special 1 week or so release pretty close to book launch,
nice.
Just for followers that are, kind of in the know. And so when folks pre-order the book, they'll get an early sneak peek link to the film. We may allow additional people to watch it during that time, but the people who pre-order it will actually be able to see it early. That's the goal anyway. I'm scrambling to try to make that happen. We do have some awesome stuff for people who pre-order, though. We have a whole bunch of interviews that didn't make it into the film with experts that we're letting people have the full footage to those interviews. So that's about 4.5 hours worth of footage that is our experts that we just had too many interviews to make an hour and 20-minute film. We're also giving away a meat cookbook and a bunch of other fun stuff, discounts to tons of meat producers and stuff like that. So anyone who pre-orders the book will get access to all of that stuff for free. So they have to order it by July 14th and submit the receipt by July 14th in order to get that.
Very cool.
And so, so I'm scrambling right now. We've got some meetings coming up to see how this could happen. The film is just about done. We think we can finish it on time. We just recorded the narration. Our celebrity narrator is Nick Offerman, which is really fun.
Nice.
Very cool.
So he's from Parks and Rec.
Oh my gosh, awesome.
Yeah. And he's a huge supporter of the project. So folks can learn about how to see the film and how to get the goodies on the book by going to sacredcow.info /book. Cool. So we have all the information there and how to submit your receipt in order to get the pre-order bonuses and to also learn how to get on that list to get the preview of the film. We're trying to make the whole film available. If we can't, we'll do like the first, 15 minutes or so of it. But we're pretty sure we're going to be able to do the whole film at some point in the very near future.
And just so you all know, the amount of time and effort that has gone into this that I've been observing from the sidelines, just following Diana, is insane. Like from what I've been watching, you have just been putting everything, heart and soul, into this project for so long. So I'm sure you are just thrilled that this is coming to life.
Yeah.
And or thrilled that it's over and I'll never do this again. I mean, you're right. It's a lot of work. I have not paid myself in the last 3 or so years working on this and will likely never make my time back, even at minimum wage. But I felt like this was such an important documentary to get out there. There's just so much misinformation. They're showing Cowspiracy in schools.
Oh my gosh.
And in my son's high school, we're not in like the middle of nowhere. This is one of the top schools in the country that he goes to. And so something needs to be a counterpoint to that. And so this is my one big thing that crazy thing that I'm doing. And, so thank you. I really appreciate you helping us get the word out about it. Absolutely. And I hope that, people, definitely buy the book for all the science, but also watch the film too, because we take you to some really amazing producers that are doing amazing work and healing the land with good livestock management.
That is awesome. And we are definitely going to be talking more about this, but please go to sacredcow.info /book. Get your copy. It is absolutely 100% worth it. I promise you.
And if you have watched The Game Changers, guys, then please watch this too, because I can't tell you how many of our clients are like, I'm going to go vegan because of this. I'm like, no. Please do your research. And so if you have watched any, like Cowspiracy, Game Changers, please read this book, get this book, watch the film. It's really going to open your eyes, you guys. And Diana, thank you. You are changing our cultural shift around meat. And we're going to see this movement and the changes that it's going to make in the next 10 to 20, 30, 40 years and so on. So thank you for your time and your effort and your sacrifices.
Thank you. Thank you so much for helping get the word out. It's we need everyone in this real food community to support this. I'm really hoping this makes the New York Times bestseller list, and we can really do that best with pre-orders. And that's why we're just giving so much stuff away, because we really need everyone's support to get this book, all the sales concentrated in July, so that we get some attention around this topic. So it's not a profit driven thing. It's like, let's get the word out and let's make this happen. So awesome. Thank you to you and to everyone else who's already pre-ordered it and supports this. So I appreciate it.
Well, thanks again, Diana. Everyone go get that. And Diana, we'll talk to you later. We'll let you go. We know you've got to run, and Janique and I are going to finish up talking about a couple other things before we finish out.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. So I hope everybody enjoyed that. I loved that, because this is a topic that is so important to me personally, because I've spent so much of my life trying to live it in a healthy and ethical and sustainable way. Mm-hmm. And I feel like this is the answer.
Yeah.
And what's so great about this is that this is exactly the same concept that we talk about all the time, which is we need to go back to what worked for generations and generations of humans before modern practices changed everything and we thought that science was smarter than nature. Right. So this is the way to do that, not just for our personal health, but also for the health of our planet.
Exactly.
We need to get back to letting nature work the way that it's supposed to work.
That it was designed to work over hundreds of thousands of years.
And we need to reclaim our place in the food chain, not as these passive, isolated consumers of it, but as active participants, knowing where it's coming from, caring where it's coming from, appreciating the sacrifices that were required to get it there, and then doing our best to kind of pay it forward by being good stewards of the land that we have control over.
The earth. I know that getting high quality, ethically raised meats is a lot more expensive, but you're not just paying for meat, you're paying for the health of the planet. You're paying for sustainable environments. You're paying for so much more than just meat. It's so that we can keep perpetuating health and wellness. It's almost like an investment in our future and our children's future and our grandchildren's future, because if there's anything that we've learned, it's that our planet is slowly dying. And I mean, so many scientists have told us, in 100 years, there are going to be some really, really bad things happening.
I don't think it's even 100 years now. And some are saying like in less than 20 years, we could start seeing some really drastic negative changes.
Exactly. And so this is one of those answers where it's like, we have to know where our food is coming from. We can't afford to not care anymore. There are some pretty massive changes that need to happen. And this is one of those.
Exactly. And hopefully it's not too late. Right. But one of the things that really surprised me about the interview was that there's really not a huge difference between getting organic grass-fed beef from a mass produced farm at the grocery store and the conventional stuff. There's a much bigger jump, though, when you switch over to the regenerative agriculture projects and start supporting more of the local farmers that are doing that. So that's a change that we're going to have to look at making, seeing if our meat sources are actually abiding by these principles, and if not, trying to find some sources that do.
Exactly. And we'll keep you guys up to date on that, like what we find. We'll do a little bit more research and we'll talk about that. And maybe we'll bring on some other people that are farmers and we will talk to them and see what they're doing and what it looks like in their circles, and they can help educate us more.
Well, and once this documentary comes out and all the extra footage, there should be a long list of options for us to reach out to. So that's going to be pretty exciting.
Exactly.
Now, before we go, do you have any things you wanted to talk about from the membership?
No. Actually, you know what? I normally do, but I was not expecting you to say that. I didn't get any. I mean, there's always stuff I want to talk about.
Okay.
But I don't have anything planned.
All right. Well, so what I want to talk about then is that we've had a really fun week in the membership because people, for some reason, this tradition has developed where people are sharing photos of the meals that they're making. And
it looks so good.
It's really awesome. It makes me a little bit jealous because like our meals, we're using the same recipes and everything. We're just not fancy, right? We don't plate it or anything like that, but we're getting all these really beautiful photos from people.
Right.
And it's like, wait, is this our recipe? Yeah. That looks really good.
You even said to me yesterday, you're like, we can make another recipe book using the members' photos.
Seriously. Seriously.
They're so pretty.
But the best part is it's not the photos. It's what people are saying about the photos, which is that not only does it look beautiful, but everyone is enjoying the food a lot.
I know. Isn't that amazing that we think that there's this subconscious belief system that healthy food is boring and it's not. And they're also saying that the meals are pretty simple too. Like they're not super labor intensive. And there's one every now and then where it, like the pad thai.
The pad thai.
The pad thai is a little bit more labor, like it's more consuming, but it's worth every minute. But most of the menus, they're so simple and they use simple spices and they're not complex. And so we've really been enjoying seeing their journeys. Later this week, I know everyone's going to be listening to this in July, but today we're interviewing Nina. She's going to be answering everyone's questions on like birth control and sex hormones.
You might remember Nina because we had her on the podcast back in, was it December?
Yeah, I think it was like December 17th.
November or December. And yeah, she's like a hormone expert. And
so members get like an hour to Nina and they're going to ask their questions. And, because everyone asks, what do you do about birth control? What about IUDs, copper IUDs, and, all the misinformation around those. And then we're doing a live Q&A tomorrow talking about digestive health because a lot of people have digestive issues. So we're going to be answering members' questions about digestion and how they can help support that and, what those steps look like. And then I think next week or the following week, we're going to have Elia talk to the members about mental health and wellness and navigating stressful times. And so it's just been fun. It's been really awesome. And people have really enjoyed the community aspect because it just helps keep the momentum going when there's a lot of naysayers in your life.
And so if that sounds familiar, that you are someone that has a lot of naysayers in your life, or there's just a lot of hurdles that make you feel like, gosh, I'd like to eat healthier. I'd like to start incorporating more of these regenerative agriculture meats in my lifestyle, but gosh, it's just so hard. All I can ever do is get food from Chick-fil-A.
Right.
Well, this membership might be just the thing for you.
Right.
It'll help you simplify the process of transforming your life for the better.
Exactly. So there you go. You guys, thanks for listening. That was so informative. I just loved listening to what she had to say. And I mean, she knows her stuff, you guys.
She does.
And if there's anything that we said, it's the research around meat has just been so bad for so many years.
And the interpretations of the research are even worse because they are meant to fit a political agenda. And, not to politicize this, but basically people have an idea of what they think is best for the world. And they're willing to kind of twist and distort the facts and how the facts are created in order to help them achieve that agenda.
Right.
And in their minds, hey, the ends justify the means, right?
Exactly.
But we don't follow that idea. We are interested in what's actually best for you and for ourselves. And if we have to challenge the research, if we have to challenge the narrative, then we're going to do that.
Right.
And so hopefully that's something we accomplished here today.
Can I get weird for a second?
Uh-oh.
No, not that weird. I was thinking as she was talking about, just sustainable, it includes bees and bugs and bacteria. And, I kept thinking of my son, Tennyson, who he's such a bug enthusiast. He cries when they die. If you guys saw my Insta stories, he was crying because one of the the flies got stuck in like a rat trap or something, and I had to rescue it with my tweezers. And he just cares so deeply, and he feels when they die, and he cries over their deaths. And part of me wonders, like, where did we become so desensitized where we see a bug and our first inkling is to kill it, right? Or is to spray our gardens to kill all the bugs. And I get it. I lived in Texas, right? Like, I hated the mosquitoes. I actually sprayed for mosquitoes, but like they are a part in the environment too. They are a part of sustainable living. They are part of making sure our soils are healthy and aerated. They have their own ecosystem that we have completely disrupted as well. And so when we think of regenerative lifestyles in living, I'm not saying go save the bugs, but what I'm saying is, like, all of these things are tied in. And where have we become desensitized?
I don't know that we have. I actually think that it's our sensitivity that drives this whole unsustainable process, because we personally can't handle death. And therefore we outsource it to other people.
That's a very good point.
And as soon as it's outsourced, it can run rampant, right? Because, hey, we're not involved. We don't have to look at it. We don't have to feel it.
Right.
And that's what's so great about watching Tennyson, is that we get to see that that natural sensitivity just blossoming. And now the task that we have as his parents is to help him make sense of that sensitivity and not let it turn him away, right? Not let him try to avoid that and outsource that in the future.
Right.
So help him see that, yes, this is incredibly sad. It hurts. It's painful that things have to die. But what do we do with that pain?
Right.
Do we run away from it? Do we cover it up? Do we medicate it?
Right.
Or do we let it keep us sensitive so that we can continue to make good choices that are for the best of the whole, not just convenient?
And for us to dive into that too, because now we have to explain that to him, and we have to think about the whole circle of life concept, right? And have to explain to him, like, some things do have to die in order for other things to live too. Like, you think of birds of prey, they eat meat, they eat other animals. And his response to that was, well, why can't they eat vegetables like us? It's like, that's just the balance of life. And so somehow we have disrupted that balance, whether it's how we spray our fields, our own homes, our produce, how we farm our animals. Like, it's a whole systems issue.
And hopefully what we drove home today with Diana was that you don't get to escape that by giving up meat.
Right.
And animal products. You don't, because even your plants come at the cost of others' lives.
Yes, exactly.
And that's okay. It's okay, because it has to be okay. But that means that you need to understand the responsibility that you take on yourself for all of your food choices. Right.
So be hyper responsible on where you put your money, because that's how we can keep supporting those farmers, those companies that are doing this, that are trying to keep the planet healthy. All right. We have a lot more say than we realize. All right. These big businesses, these big agriculture, big pharma, big government, like, they talk the language of money. So let's talk the language of money too, and put our money in the places that we want sustained and perpetuated.
Right. And in my opinion, the best way to do that right now is to go get the book, sacredcow.info/book.
Yeah. Let's support this movement, you guys.
And educate yourself in the process.
Exactly. And that's it.
That's it.
Okay. You guys, if you loved this, please leave a review, and thanks for listening. I certainly learned a lot, and I can't wait for you guys to hear this.
Yeah. And share it with all your vegan friends.
Or don't share it with them until when they're ready. So,
or now.
I don't.
All right. We love you guys. Thank you. We will talk to you again soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.